Yalitza is located near to the former historical Polish capital Krakow, known for the oldest active salt mine in Europe. The mine was built 700 years ago and today is easy to visit due to the tourist infrastructure set up around it. Nature supplies the salt and salt crystals. And the mines, created through the mining of salt, form a labyrinth of over 300 miles of underground passageways and chambers. As legend has it, Yalitza's salt was to serve as the dowry for Kunigund, daughter of the Hungarian King Béla, when she married Boleslaw the Chaste. Methane gas, here called saltpeter, used to have to be burned by experienced miners. Today, the mine is equipped with 3 ventilation systems. The work of the mountain men was exhausting and dangerous. They had to dig deep into the salt deposits after the surface brine wells had dried up. In the 17th century, up to 100 horses lived for years in the tunnels and provided the laborious transport. King Casimir introduced in 1368 many rights and privileges for the miners. But the ruler did enjoy the privilege of the extraction and sale of the salt. The salt rock boulders were broken down in the tunnels, dissolved in water and transported up in barrels with a simple elevator device. The water came from lower-lying collection points and was carried over and over again to the wooden vats or pumped up via so-called paternoster lifts. The underground salt deposits built up from the evaporation residue of the waters of the Miocene Sea, block-shaped above and seam-shaped below. This was recognized early on by humans who knew how to make use of this knowledge. The miners were highly religious, which led to the construction of various chapels in the mountain. But the incredible highlight is when you see the majesty of a cathedral made of salt. Salt is an ancient symbol of friendship, loyalty, and connectedness. The figures and reliefs on the walls are all carved out of salt and show Christian motifs, stages in Jesus' life. The flight into Egypt, the crib at Bethlehem, the Last Supper, and the resurrection. Different altars made out of salt, such as of Kinga, Kunigund, blessed by Pope John Paul II. The salt labyrinth of Yalitza was known throughout medieval Europe, with the mines finally reaching 250 kilometers in length. Heaps of the extracted salt can be seen over and over again. And the tour leads through chambers where wooden wickerwork reveals the masterful art of the mine carpenters. The oversized wooden structures are designed so that they can withstand the pressure of the overlying chamber ceiling. Even souvenirs made out of salt are for sale in one chamber. Now a wooden staircase leads deeper into a next chamber, at the bottom of which a small lake can be seen. Finally, the chamber Pilsudski lies before us, with an almost endless staircase from the upper entrance to the floor, which is covered with water. The lighting here makes everything look like a scene from a fairy tale. We reach the chamber Warsawa at a depth of 125 meters. And then yet another staircase leading down to the chapel of St. John. Holy Masses have been held here from as early as 1859. The Salt Mine Museum is located in the old mine. The gala uniforms of the miners are exhibited here. As well as various salt-coated objects and exceptionally shaped salt crystals. These were created by water leaking in, leading to the formation of these unique shapes. It is the slow crystallization of the salt that has conjured up these structures of extraordinary beauty. This salt mine from the 13th century secured prosperity and wealth for the area for centuries. The mine provided people work, resulting in large swathes of miners in the area. But fire, water leaks, and methane gas continued to pose a threat to lives and health. However, people have learned to live like this, and have done so for 5,000 years alongside the salt extraction from these high-lying sources. The Yalitza mine is a sunken world, an Atlantis made of salt, created by nature and by man, magnificent and mysterious.
After 466 years, Portugal handed back the city of Macau to China. On the peninsula, the ruins of Sao Paulo are well worth a closer look. This was once the bastion of Christianity in Asia. The stone facade was built in 1620 by exiled Japanese Christians, and its wooden interior was once splendidly decorated and furnished. However, fate dealt it a severe blow. In January 1835, a typhoon devastated this symbol of Christianity, and only the facade remained. The Fortaleza Demonte is a typical Portuguese fortified complex, strategically located on a hill above the old cathedral in the heart of the city. Its many old cannons and mighty fortress walls are reminders of those times when invasion was a constant threat. From here, there's a wonderful panoramic view across the entire city. Today, the historic walls of the fortress contain a tranquil garden that is used for gymnastic exercises and traditional Tai Chi. Macau is small and museum-like, a colonial gem in Asia. A fine example of colonial Portugal on the southern China Sea. Fascinating and lively. The original cathedral was destroyed by a typhoon in 1874. Today's cathedral was built in 1937. When Macau became a Portuguese colony in 1557, along with the first settlers came priests who were eager to spread the word of Christianity throughout the Chinese mainland. The interior of the Catholic cathedral gives an immediate impression of light and space. The adjoining museum contains valuable church treasures such as religious paintings, sculpture, and bishops' crowns. Two sturdy towers, massive doors, and large mosaic windows dominate the facade. The old center of the city is the triangular 3,700 square meter Lago do Senado, Senate Square. These wonderful colonial buildings, with their light-colored facades, were built at the end of the 19th century and completely renovated in the final decade of the 20th century. Arcades flank the mosaic-covered square and highlights those years when Portuguese influence was at its height. On the southwestern side of the square is the noble-looking Leal Senado. The former residence of the influential city senate is now City Hall. Wide steps lead into a small, tranquil courtyard and garden, as was common in Renaissance architecture. This area contains the stone busts of several of Portugal's leading historic figures. It was from here that the city was successfully ruled for many centuries. Macau's largest Buddhist temple, Kunyam Tong, dates back 400 years to the Ming dynasty, when its original foundations were built. Beyond its main gate, just off a busy street in the north of the city, is a peaceful oasis of silence and contemplation. A mystical place in which stone lions, golden Buddhas, and all who come here are surrounded by serene, aromatic wisps of smoke. Kunyam, the goddess of mercy, is worshipped by all Chinese, whether Buddhist or Taoist. In Macau, total freedom of religion is the norm. For each of China's religions, including Christianity, tolerance and mutual respect live side by side. The beautiful Jardim Lu Lim Yok Park is situated in the northern, less touristy business district of the city. It was designed in the 19th century by wealthy Chinese trader Lao Kao. This marvelous oasis is an idyllic setting with a lotus pond, rocks, grottos, and waterfalls. A place of contemplation and relaxation. This is a good location to take photos. The elderly rest on shady benches, and elegant courtyards and arcades add the finishing touch. Its design was based on the famous Suzhou Gardens and is evocative of China's fine old traditional ink paintings. A zigzag bridge spans the pond because it's believed that evil spirits can only move in a straight line. With its tall veranda, this large pavilion was built in pseudo-Victorian style during the Qing dynasty. The view is truly captivating. The large tiled arched gate emphasizes the symbolic importance of this magnificent garden, which is now open to the public. In the heart of the city, the Cementerio de San Miguel is Macau's largest Catholic cemetery. Ornate gravestones and statues of angels adorn the graves of several influential Portuguese families and those of the many Chinese who converted to Christianity. It's very similar to a European cemetery, and at its center there is a light-colored chapel that dates back to 1875. The interior of the neo-Gothic building is beautifully illuminated due to its colorful mosaic windows. A large fountain greets visitors to the Jardim Luís de Camões. In the 18th century, Macau's oldest park belonged to the British East India Company. Men bring songbirds to the park to display the singing skills of the tiny, caged creatures. The local people enjoy this place of tranquility and relaxation, where both young and old appreciate the surroundings. This was once a famous retreat for the writer Luís de Camões. Close by, a tall gate leads to an elegant building that dates back to colonial times, surrounded by an immaculate garden. Today, this building is owned by the Fundição Oriente, and in past times was the residence of the authorized agent of the East India Company. Here, noisy traffic is the order of the day. Tightly packed four-story buildings add to the narrow, almost claustrophobic streets. Perhaps this is the reason for the existence of the many prayer niches. At the entrance to the inner part of the harbour, and dating back to the 15th century, is the city's oldest place of worship for its Chinese inhabitants, Ama Miu. It was built into a mountainside. Ama, the Taoist goddess of seafarers and fishermen, is worshipped here. This temple complex existed long before the arrival of the Portuguese. Legend has it that a Chinese junk once sailed into a dangerous typhoon, and a young and beautiful woman saved all on board by subduing the raging storm. Across steep pathways and with a wonderful view of both harbour and temple, there are 4 prayer pavilions in which the numerous benevolent gods are worshipped. featured in the main courtyard is the stone image of the junk in which the goddess and patron of the city of Macau is said to have landed. Opposite the temple by the water's edge is the modern Museo Martimo. The museum covers the history of all those who have lived in this ancient European settlement of Macau. European conquerors, mighty mandarins, cruel pirates, missionaries and traders. Shipbuilding is also featured, along with a combination of Portuguese customs and thousands of years of Chinese culture exhibited on 3 floors. The museum also contains a display of fishing techniques. This underlines how much the sea has influenced the character of this intriguing city. Excursions are available on restored motorized junks that leave from the museum's pier several times a day. A journey by junk is a fascinating and nostalgic experience. The junk travels along the coast and provides a perfect view of the city's modern skyline with its skyscrapers and huge television tower, beneath a long bridge towards Taipa. Completed in 1974, the 3-kilometer long and 30-meter high bridge extends from Macau to the island of Taipa. From far out at sea, there's a sight of the Penha Church on the southern hillside of the peninsula. The harbour has all the wonderful atmosphere of a bygone age. Taipa is the largest of the 2 islands that belong to Macau. The tangled and narrow alleys in the center of Villa Taipa abound with rural character. Portuguese street signs are painted on azulejos, and the island's shops and light-colored houses would be equally at home in Portugal. Passing wonderfully restored colonial houses, several small restaurants and cafes next to small temple niches provide the perfect opportunity to relax. The islanders are highly religious and take great pride in their temples, in which the art of feng shui plays an important part. Religious tolerance is observed here too. A Above Villa Taipa is the Carmel Catholic Church that was built in the 19th century. It boasts a square and some interesting buildings. The airy and attractive Catholic Church is very popular for weddings and various other religious celebrations. In contrast, the Chinese temples are smaller, intimate places of worship. During Macau's golden years, the remote bays on the outer island of Goloane were the haunt of pirates. Even today, this tiny village exudes an atmosphere of pirates and adventure, and Buddha watches over all. In the shipyards in the north of the island, as in former times, wooden planks destined to form the hull of traditional junks are carefully shaped over an open fire. With its attractive, though partly dilapidated buildings, the promenade is reminiscent of a Mediterranean resort. Villa Goloane is a tiny Portuguese square, encircled by arcades and crowned by the Capella de Francisco Xavier. The bones of 59 Japanese martyrs are stored within a sacrarium, and of particular interest is the painting of a Chinese Madonna and Child. At the end of the promenade is the Chinese Tam Kung Temple that contains a model of a ship carved out of whalebone. The journey back to Macau returns over the long, elegant bridge. And next, a place of both present and future, the Museo do Grande Premio, an absolute mecca for motorsport fans. The museum features the colourful history of the famous Macau Grand Prix that takes place in the city each November. Grand Prix is the social and sport event of the year. Although the Macau of today has much contemporary flair, it continues to enjoy its rich colonial inheritance. Now there are skyscrapers on land that has been reclaimed from the sea. Impressive bridges connect the islands, and deep-sea harbours and new airports have added to its appeal. For many years, Macau's casinos were its principal source of revenue and created the wealth that financed the island. Since the middle of the 19th century, and lying only 60 kilometers away, the former British colony of Hong Kong was this region's glittering center of capitalism, while Macau was a place of melancholy and nostalgia. However, today, both belong to China.
Lucerne, the largest city in central Switzerland, is located on the western shore of Lake Lucerne. Today, it is one of the most important destinations for tourists in the country. During the Reformation, Lucerne was the centre of the Catholic resistance, time and time again entangled in political and religious conflicts. The Jesuit Church is considered a symbol of the Swiss Baroque, with a noticeable Rococo high altar made of red marble. Stucco is abundant, framing the magnificent ceiling paintings that depict motifs of Saint Francis Xavier. Bright light penetrates through arched windows into the Baroque interior. The old town sits on a bend of the River Reuss, just where the river leaves Lake Lucerne. And a weir stems the powerful flow of water. The beautiful facades of the old houses are adorned with frescoes or sgraffito paintings. The Franciscan Church stands as the oldest building in the city and was completed in 1270. It is a typical building of the medieval mendicant orders. Originally built in the Gothic style, the church has been rebuilt several times over the centuries. The church may seem austere from the outside, but inside you will be surprised by the Baroque ceiling decor, the Renaissance stalls and the altars. The Sproya Bridge is a covered wooden bridge over the Reuss on the western edge of the old town. A small chapel perches on the bridge, and the inner roof is decorated with a painted Dance of Death by Caspar Meglinger. The Museg wall runs from the north bank up a steep slope. At first, overlooking the river and the hills opposite. 9 towers are connected with walkways, and from here you can enjoy a panoramic view of the city and the lake. As early as 1220, the fishing village became an important reloading point for all those that had managed to overcome the St. Gotthard Pass on the trade route to the south. The city became rich and powerful, and in the 19th century, tourism finally began to develop here. Along the quay of the Reuss, the atmosphere is leisurely, and fruit stalls and guild halls accompany you down the promenade. In nice weather, the tables of the hotels and restaurants close to the banks of the river are always full with good-humoured people. From the big bridge at the start of the Reuss, the Schweizerhof quay leads along the northern shore of the lake. Here are the moorings of the boat rental companies, and an anchored restaurant aboard a boat invites us in for a visit. Almost close enough to touch is the Hofkirche, from which only the pointed twin towers remain. In 1633, a fire almost completely destroyed the original 12th century building. Inside is the mesmerizing high altar, with statues of the saints Liudger and Mauritius, the patron saints of Lucerne. The Hofkirche beautifully represents the late Renaissance in Switzerland. A little further north of the city, the Lion Memorial is well visited. A massive figure of a standing lion, chiselled out of the sandstone of a cliff. Right next door, the Glacier Garden was created on rocks and caverns of the last ice age. Here you can see the geological process of movement of water and stones under the glacier. Back at the shore of the lake, the Schweizerhof quay turns into the National Quay, lined with luxury hotels, yacht harbours and parks. Then you reach the Swiss Museum of Transport, an extensive and interesting museum about transport technology. The Rail Traffic Department documents the transport history of Switzerland, from the horse car to steam-powered monsters right up to the electric train. A large section of the exhibition is also dedicated to the development of cars. Here you can see very clearly the ongoing changes in the auto industry. Ships are exhibited here too, from the wooden barge to the start of steamships, and they also explain the development of cruise ships. In a huge hall, you can discover many different types of vehicles. Some hang as if they're flying and can be viewed from different viewpoints. Here, technology becomes an adventure. Now back at the Lake Bridge, we can visit the landing bridges, from where ships arrive at and depart from Lake Lucerne. Directly behind is the station, with the newly designed courtyard, which was built after a major fire. There's always a lot going on here, and the ships come and go. Particularly in the summer months, ship traffic often increases drastically. The city is one of the most visited in the world, and the mountains and lake combine to form a fascinating backdrop. And the symbol of the city, the oldest wooden bridge in Europe, is the most popular photo. Lucerne is Swiss history and culture, a treasure under the White Cross.
Where the waters of the Ijssel Sea once flowed is today the vast flat land of the youngest Dutch province of Flevoland. Only a few kilometers east of Ens, the small village of Schokland emerges from the landscape. This region is an extraordinary example of the historical reclamation of the land from the sea. Schokland is a symbol of the past struggles of its people to reclaim and protect their land from the power of nature. Even the ancient Romans reported the rising sea levels of this area that caused severe flooding of the land even in their time. Because of much massive flooding and the destruction of a bog, during the middle of the 15th century, Schokland was completely cut off from the mainland and was transformed into an island. Since time immemorial, this region has been influenced by the natural force of the sea. To overcome this, the inhabitants built up the land to protect their dwellings from the encroachment of the sea. Following several disastrous floods, in 1859, the last remaining villages were finally evacuated by royal decree. Thus, the inhabitants of this small island of fishermen were forced to leave their homes. But thanks to the modern construction methods of the 20th century, the area around Schokland was reclaimed from the sea and once again made habitable. Following the successful drainage of the land, archaeologists made remarkable discoveries that indicated the relatively highly developed construction techniques of Schokland's past inhabitants. Only this small hill and its houses, plus this well-preserved church, survived the floods. The remaining area disappeared forever beneath the sea. The archaeological finds are now on display in a museum. The architecture of Schokland's old Waterstaats Church was influenced by Calvinism. Today it is a public museum. Close by on the former island of Urk, strict Calvinistic customs are still observed. On Sundays, some of the village's inhabitants still wear traditional costume. Built in 1836, the old Waterstaats Church of the Schoks was miraculously spared from the waters of the Zuiderzee. This former island has a unique ambience, and the church is in great demand for marriage ceremonies. The fully restored wooden and stone ramparts that still surround the small village of Schokland are impressive symbols of the historic struggle of the Dutch against the might of the sea. The continuous battle with the sea that eventually led to the founding of the 12th Dutch province has left many traces here. Some of Schokland's buildings still show signs of the height the water reached in this village, which eventually caused its evacuation. Zuiderzee, a project that took 100 years to complete, enabled this region to be transformed into a prosperous and fertile land. In 1986, Flevoland, and therefore also Schokland, became the Netherlands' 12th and youngest province. The reclaiming of the Zuiderzee created more than 165,000 hectares of new land. Because of its successful struggle with the sea, Schokland can once more be approached from all sides.